Are you and your spouse on the same page when it comes to what retirement is going to look like? If not, it's time to talk. And today, we're going to talk about that exactly on this episode. We're going to explore why couples need to have a detailed conversation about their finances and their retirement future.
Welcome to the My Retirement Clarity Podcast, where our goal is simple, to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. The team at Perkins Wealth Management does this by helping good people make great decisions so they can enjoy an amazing retirement. And now, here's your host and financial advisor, Lee Perkins.
Hello, welcome in. Glad to have you on My Retirement Clarity. I'm Ben George with Lee Perkins, owner of Perkins Wealth Management and a financial advisor. And Lee, I know you have couples all the time in your office working with you, but again, this is such an important topic, talking about why couples need to be on the same page.
Absolutely. There are times where I come out of meetings and I feel like I've just done some couples therapy, but it's usually a lot of fun, and most of the times we can at least help people see eye to eye. We don't always get everybody on the same page fully, but these conversations are healthy. It's a lot of fun and a part of my job that I really do enjoy.
Yeah, and you can schedule a time to meet with Lee anytime by going to talkwithjlp.com. Again, talkwithjlp.com. So Lee, why is it so important then for couples to work together when it comes to retirement planning?
I just think it's important to be on the same page in this area of your life. I mean, you want to be on your same page. A couple does anyway on a lot of big things. It's raising your kids, maybe your religion, all different kind of things. But you need to be on the same page financially as well, which dovetails into being on the same page financially when you think about what's going to happen in retirement. If somebody's got different ideas, it's going to be a struggle. So you want to make sure you get those things out in the open. Does one person want to do more travel and the other one sort of is a homebody? You gotta, there's a healthy give and take. I would also say another area where sometimes people aren't on the same page that I think they need to work a little bit better on is grandkids, and meaning their level of involvement. Are they going to chase grandkids all over the country? Are they going to move, follow them? And then also, how much are they going to give to grandkids? Because, boy, it is easy to spend money on grandkids, apparently. I don't have any grandkids. I will one day, hopefully. And then maybe I will know how much of a temptation that is to spoil them and spend probably way more money than I should.
Yeah, it's a fun time to have those grandkids, I'm sure, running around. But that time we'll have to wait, Lee. As I think about couples coming in to meet with you, and if someone's listening to this to try to determine whether or not they want to have both parties come in and sit down with you, do you think when people come in for that first time to meet with you and your team, is it their first real conversation about finances, or have they been talking about it for a little while and feel comfortable about it?
I would say if a couple comes in, now if somebody comes in individually, chances are that they really may not have had that conversation or too much of a conversation with their spouse. But if somebody comes in as a couple, most of the time they've given it some level of thought. But I would say probably no real details have come into those conversations. I would say probably 70% of couples have at least some idea of what they're going to do when they retire. So it's certainly not 100% that everybody's talked about it, but a good portion of it has. I'd say probably the other 30% usually has one person who is adamant that the other one doesn't need to retire right now. That's the person that's usually a little more worried about the stock market or questioning whether or not they have enough money. Once we go through the numbers and we can kind of show that the numbers work, that person usually kind of maybe accepts the other person's idea that, hey, maybe this is a possibility. But I would say maybe when a new couple comes in, only maybe one of 20 have an actual idea of their numbers. They've done the homework. But yeah, most people have not.
Well, how important is it for them to be on the same page? Is it okay if you haven't talked about it yet and you say, okay, I want to sit down and start having those conversations for the first time in an advisor's office?
Yeah, that's completely fine to me because sometimes I can help them see things that maybe they couldn't see before. So no, that they don't have to have had the conversation before, because if they wait until they've had the conversation, sometimes one of the spouses will avoid that conversation altogether, and then they may never come in at all.
All right. So then, if for anyone that's wanting to know kind of where their focus needs to be, what's most important? What do I need to be talking about and thinking about and discussing the most with my spouse or significant other when we're talking about retirement?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the main conversation is always money. That's the one that jumps out. So if you're not on the same page financially there, generally with expenses, problems are going to surface. So it's important when somebody's first retiring to have a line item in the budget, what Dave Ramsey used to call blow money. Just have some money designated for each of you to do whatever you want to do, and the other person doesn't need to really have a say-so about it. So if you get $1,000 a month in blow money, then I don't care what you do with it. If I get $1,000 a month, then you shouldn't care what I do with it. So if that's budgeted in, I mean, if my wife wants to go spend all of her money shopping, there shouldn't be any issues. If I want to go and spend all my money, playing golf or buying fishing equipment, that it shouldn't matter. Again, where it gets tricky, and like I've alluded to earlier, is spending on grandkids, and not. I don't know. It just gets tricky. Sometimes people spend way, way, way too much on grandkids, especially at Christmas, and this can create some stress on the budget. People can wind up getting credit card debt that they didn't plan on. So that's a big thing. And I would also say the other thing that needs to be discussed ahead of time is what does the day-to-day look like? Traveling versus staying home. If you stay at home, how do you give each other space? Because for however many years you've been married, if you've both been working, 8 hours or 9 hours a day, you've been at your separate companies. You've had built-in time away. Well, you retire, now you're in your house. You're cooped up in your house together all day. So I've kind of shared the example before on the show that, during the day, my dad, a lot of times he sort of hangs out in his shop, and my mom hangs out in the house. They'll meet together for lunch and hang out a little bit and supper and all that, but they'll tell you if we were in the same room, in the same house together all day, every day, they would probably fight.
So true. And I'm curious what they fight about the most. I mean, where do you see those disagreements come? What area of maybe money do you see them not on the same page as much on?
It's usually when one person doesn't value what the other person is spending their money on. My wife would tell me, well, I don't know. She actually mentioned the other day, she said, you have a problem, don't you? And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, when you get fixated on something, like she says, I'm a phase person. Like I went through my pickleball phase, and I still love pickleball. I don't play as much as I used to because my knee hurts really, really bad. But going through the pickleball phase, I bought we put in a pickleball court. And of course, I bought a pickleball machine so I could practice. And I bought a whole bunch of pickleball paddles. Well, so I'm not ending my pickleball phase. Now I'm in a golf phase. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm playing a lot of golf. So it just kind of, so she doesn't see why the golf clubs that I had 5 years ago, why can't you just use those? So she doesn't really value that. I may not value some of the things that she spends money on. So, it's, again, that's why if you're staying on the budget as far as giving each other money to do whatever with, a lot of those fights, or not fights, disagreements can be taken care of. Hey folks, Lee Perkins here. I wanted to tell you about our brand new book called Next Phase, How to Retire in a Year or Less Without Regrets. It's all about helping you prepare for the next phase of your life, whatever that looks like for you. So, if you're ready to make the most of your next phase, or if you're already retired and aren't sure you're doing all you can to get the most out of your retirement, then you'll want a copy of this book. All you have to do is text Next Phase to 478-475-2050, and we'll send you a copy right away. You can also access additional resources and register for one of our upcoming workshops at our website, www.myretirementclarity.com. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
I know that I often think that when maybe two of the most common areas, just generally speaking, that spouses maybe disagree on. I think risk obviously is a big one. How risky should our investments be, and then also spending happens, as you talked about. Two big things. So how do you navigate these things, or how do you, maybe especially on your end, help people navigate through these areas where there are, I guess, some stark differences oftentimes?
Yeah. So I think from a spending habit, I've kind of talked a little bit in circles about that. Just kind of respecting what the other person is going to spend as long as it's within the budget. But from a risk standpoint, we usually look at this individually because most of the time they are not they don't carry the same tolerance for risk or the same risk capacity. So we want to look at this individually because we want to make sure that each person is comfortable. But I also do look at it as a whole for a family kind of going into retirement. But think about it. When he was working, he had his 401k and he did whatever he wanted with it. When she was working, she had her 401k and she did whatever she wanted with it. Now, every once in a while, I will find that there's one spouse that sort of did the investing. They logged in as the other spouse and sort of chose those investments. And I'm not saying that this is wrong, but if that happens, then that usually the spouse that's doing that is going to invest that money per their risk tolerance and not for their spouse's risk tolerance. Again, not the worst thing, because there's some spouses that don't have a clue. I met with somebody about 3 weeks ago. Her money is in her company's 401k. She's been there for 30 years. Her money has literally been sitting in a money market account for 30 years. She's never had any money in the market. She would have 4 times the money that she has, but she was never comfortable with it and never really got any advice.
That's crazy. Well, look, I know before we kind of answer these last couple of questions, I want to offer you the chance to get your hands on a book that Lee wrote. And again, this can help not only couples that are looking into retirement and individuals as well, but that next phase book, Lee, how can it benefit people?
Yeah, I think it will benefit people because it will give them some really good talking points, maybe some things that they've never really thought of. One of the things about retiring is you don't know what you don't know. And I try to cover enough topics in the book to get a couple talking and thinking about some things, and hopefully add some value and maybe give them the hope that retirement is a possibility. Now, the title of the book is Next Phase, How to Retire in a Year or Less. Can you retire in a year or less? Many people can, and there's a lot of people who are still working that don't need to be working because they don't know. So yeah, I think that book is a great step. And again, like I say, if you want to get a copy of that, you can text Next Phase to 478-475-2050, and we'll give you a copy of that book.
All right, very good. Let's close it out with a couple more questions, Lee, because we want. I know it's important to have couples together and working on this, but is it okay if one of the spouses decides, okay, I'm going to handle all the financial matters overall, or do you like to see both parties heavily involved?
Yeah, I think it's important for both to be involved, but it's tough because there's usually one person that 100% trust the other one to handle things, and that's fine. They've earned that trust, but I think both people need to be in the loop because one person will die first, and if it's the person who handles all the finances, it could lead to some problems. Now, admittedly, we've got some clients who still operate like this, despite everything that I tell them. I need you to both be involved. Maybe only one of them will come to our annual or semi-annual review meetings, so that one person just sort of, the other person is kind of uninvolved. Now, they will be involved at some point once their spouse passes away, and that can be a challenge. But, our firm, we're here, we're committed to help them through that when that happens. I don't know, we've had maybe a dozen or so clients die in the last few years. Probably 18 clients die in the past 4 years. And it's tough. It's not easy because if you're starting from scratch, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of, you still need to grieve. And so do you really want to be learning all of this stuff when you could have been maybe a little bit more involved throughout the process, and that way you at least have an idea of what's going on. So that's why it's important, to work with an advisor that can help you do that, because if your spouse is just doing everything on their own and you're not involved with a financial advisor and that spouse passes away, you're setting yourself up for some issues, and then you're also setting yourself up to be taken advantage of, because the last thing you want to do is be riding up and down Main Street in your town trying to find somebody to entrust with your $2 million or so, or whatever it is. So yeah, I'd encourage you to both be as involved as you can.
All right, well, let's close out this episode then, Lee, with a little bit of advice, maybe some final advice that maybe you'd give couples that are listening to this and trying to kind of determine what their next step should be. What would you tell them if they're beginning their retirement planning journey? What advice would you provide?
I would just say, just be an open book to one another. This gets back to maybe my couples therapy thing. Just talk about what you want. Talk about what's important to you when it comes to retirement, what your dreams are, and just see if you kind of are aligned with what your spouse wants to do, and just kind of have an idea. You may have to make some compromises. You will have to make some compromises, because marriage is all about compromising. Now, if you're a single person, hey, it should be easier because you don't have to consult with anybody. But, again, just make sure that you kind of put everything out there. Make sure your spouse knows what you want to do. And again, I would say sit down with an advisor. It doesn't have to be me or somebody here at my firm. It can be somebody else, just with somebody that can help you make the best decision for you both, because you certainly don't want to retire earlier than you needed to and then question that decision. That's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. If you want to sit down with Lee and the team, again, talkwithjlp.com. Best place to start. You can find a time that works for you on Lee's calendar. But if you want to call the office there in Macon, you can do so at 478-254-3550. I encourage everyone to take advantage of that next phase book offer. And again, if you want to hear more conversations like these, educational information around financial planning, please hit subscribe on the podcast. Lee, I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Ben. Take care. Hey there, Lee Perkins here. If you're like a lot of folks, you've been listening to this podcast for a long time now. But I've got an important question for you. Have you implemented any of the ideas that we've discussed on the show? If you haven't, what are you waiting on? You know you're not getting any younger. So here's my challenge. Don't just consume the content. Our number one goal for this podcast is to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. So if you're ready to implement, take that first step today and visit www.talkwithjlp.com and schedule a 15-minute phone call with one of our advisors, and we'll help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement so you can enjoy the next phase of your life. Now is your time. Don't procrastinate any longer.
Investment advisory services are offered by J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and insurance agency. Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Always consult with a qualified tax, legal, or investment professional before taking any action.